Okay. I've been out sweating today already. We're going to do 10 minutes. Same book. Page 116. I gotta set a timer. Timer. Hold on. It's the clock setting, I guess. And we're gonna go to 10 minutes. Ready? Page 116. The Chronicles of Baron Trump. Nope. The Baron Trump collection. Turning now softly, I groped my way toward it and stretched myself at full length on its bare surface. For a few minutes all went well. Such a conflict of thought was raging in the chambers of my limbs. I closed my eyes, thinking to coax to sleep to them and thus forget the ever-increasing pain. In vain. It seemed as if death itself had seized my feet between his icy palms. Sharp pains leapt from one joint to another, and wherever my body came in contact with that couch of stone, it seemed as if 1,000 needles pricked my flesh. Half crazed by the ever-increasing agony, I tossed from side to side, like one in a delirium. At times I sat up to escape from stupefying dizziness, which caught me in its swift encircling whirl. My heated pulse beat at the thin walls of my temple until it seemed as if I should go mad. A rushing, soughing, gurgling sound of many waters roared in my ears, while strange, fantastic forms and lines of fire on inky background flitted to and fro before my eyes, until I began to fear I should soon be doomed to sit in eternal gloom like Beniaga himself. And now, heat and cold held alternate sway within my tired and broken frame. Vainly I strove to wet my parched lips with my tongue. The fever had dried it to a chip. For a few moments the torture ceased. I breathed more freely. My limbs, I thought, are getting used to their couch of stone. I shall fall asleep and forget my sufferings. But no, with redoubled fury they came back to their work. I dared not cry out soon to Beniaga for mercy, for release from the cruel conditions he had imposed upon me. Rather, death than yield so quickly. Shrink so like a coward who stands motionless and trembling on the battlefield as a spent ball strikes his breast. I slept at last, but oh, what a broken, fevered sleep it was. A sleep with unclosed eyes, full of dark and dismal sights. I could stand no more. I yielded and longed for death. In thought, I kissed my parents' hand and felt their soft caresses on my brow and face. And then it seemed the gracious Baroness, my mother, caught my hand in hers and pressed it fervently to her lips. The kiss was so warm, so tender, so lifelike, that I started up like one awakening from a long delirium. It cannot be a dream, I murmured. I am awake. Tossing my racked form over on its side so that I could touch my right hand, the one on which I had felt the kiss, with my left, the mystery was explained. To Bolger. He was beside my couch of stone. It was he who had licked my cold, numb hand and turned my thoughts homeward. I caressed his head and ears and sought to make him lie down, lest the rustle might disturb the blind hermit. He refused to obey, although I thrice let him know my wishes. It was first his act of disobedience, and for an instant drove all thoughts of pain from my mind. To my suffering now came this new grief. Aroused from my stupor at last by his persistent refusal to obey, I collected my thoughts sufficiently to realize that he was bent upon leaping on my couch. His forefeet were already resting upon its edge. I dared not resist, lest he should break the solemn stillness of Beniaga's cave by giving vent to some sound of entreaty. No sooner had he sprung upon the rocky shelf than I felt him crouching on its edge and reaching down as if in the act of seizing something in his teeth, something so heavy, too, that it called for violent exertion. Whatever it was, I was not slow in discovering that he was endeavoring to drag it upon my rocky couch. Half rising, I stretched out my hand to solve the mystery. Oh, beloved Bulger! In an outburst of affection, I pressed my lips repeatedly upon his body. He took no note of my caresses, but only tugged the harder at the thing he held within his teeth. It was my blanket. Taught in his early years to fetch my slippers, my gloves, my cap to me when he found them lying here and there, he had never forgotten to render me these petty services. And thus, noticing that my blanket had apparently been forgotten, he seized it, heavy as it was, and dragged it to his little master's bed. Regardless of Beniaga's ire, unmindful of the fact that to accept Bulger's gift was plainly an open breach of the compact between the blind hermit and me, I wrapped my bruised and aching body in the thick, warm covering and fell into a long, refreshing sleep. Such was my first night in Beniaga's cave. The next day was bright and clear, and the rocky chamber seemed less dismal to me. My eyes were becoming accustomed to the gloom. From morn till night, I shunned that bed of torture, passing my time studying out the hidden meaning of the words which Beniaga had carved on the rocky walls, watching the birds as they flitted in with the food of their nestlings, or standing near the blind hermit, with my gaze riveted upon his noble features, thick, clustering hair, and far-flowing beard. From this time forth, all went well. I soon forgot the long hours of that terrible night of silence and despair. Indeed, I was astounded to find how swiftly the time sped along when one gives himself up to deep and all-absorbing meditation. Days and nights flitted by like alternate hours of light and darkness. I was startled from the deep sleep by hearing the full round voice of Beniaga saying, "Up, up, little traveler, up. My son, the morn is breaking. The appointed hour has come. Today we must enter Paunma Talin, or thy apprenticeship shall have been in vain." I sprang up, and approaching Beniaga, related in tones of unfeigned grief how I had disregarded the sacred compact between us, and that, although it cut me to the heart to be obliged to turn back, when I stood upon the very confines of the great gloomy forest, yet I was not worthy to follow him, and was firmly resolved not to plead for mercy. How I told him all, how my frame had been so racked by pain that I was upon the very point of crying out for release from the terrible compact, when my beloved Bulger came to my relief and saved me from that degradation. He heard me in silence. His noble countenance gave no sign or hint of what was going on within that lofty soul. At last, a sad and almost imperceptible smile spread over his face, and he spake as follows: "Take heart, my son, all is forgiven. Thou art but a child, and I should have lightened the burden of this apprenticeship. Nor can I hold thee worthy of blame for yielding of such touching proof of thy dog's love for thee. Hadst thou repulsed him, he would have lain in wakeful sorrow by thy bedside all that night. Dear faithful soul, would he belonged to me?" So saying, Beniaga bent his towering form and caressed Bulger's head and ears. Nor was Bulger slow in returning the hermit's caresses. They had become the best of friends. Bulger felt the fascination of Beniaga's mysterious power from the very first. When the hour arrived for us to leave the rocky chamber of gloom and silence and step out into the sunlight once more, my heart broke out into its old-time beat. Had I not been in the presence of the venerable Beniaga, I should have leapt and danced for joy as we emerged from that dreary abode, and I felt the warm air fan my cheek once more. But one thing struck me now most forcibly. It was the wonderful change which I noted in the blind hermit himself. When he stood in the sunlight and the morning breezes tossed the curls of his white silken hair, like April winds making merry with a flock of snowflakes. First, his appearance was quite different from that to which I had become accustomed. A leathern cap crowned his massive head and held his thick, rebellious hair somewhat in control. His wide, flowing beard had entirely disappeared beneath his rude garb, save it where his wide, flowing beard had entirely disappeared beneath his rude garb, save where it clothed his face and neck. I saw at once that he was clad for work, for toilsome progress through Polymathalin's thick growth. In his right hand he carried a curious rod, or wand, long, slender, polished, and extremely flexible. I soon learned to wonder at his extraordinary skill in using the staff to guide his steps or discover the nature of any object not within the reach of his hands. A rude pouch or leather bag was swung across his shoulder. All right, kids. Time has come. We are done. We read our 10 minutes. Summer's coming, so I look pretty bad when I'm way far out. Look at my face. It just looks so red. Ta-da! Okay. Have a great day.